When the shy waitress stepped up to serve the Mafia Boss's father, the feared Sicilian Don who hadn't smiled in 20 years, everyone expected her to tremble or stutter. But instead, she greeted him softly in the pure Sicilian dialect, words so old, so intimate, that they froze the entire room. In that moment, every gunman, every guest, even the Don himself stopped breathing, because those words hadn't been spoken in that house since the day his wife died. The Valerio mansion glimmered that night like a palace carved from gold. Crystal chandeliers threw soft light over velvet walls, and violins played beneath the low hum of expensive conversation. It was Don Salvatore Valerio's birthday, the kind of evening where the rich pretended to be gentle, and killers wore silk ties instead of scars. Every guest knew that stepping into this room meant stepping into the world of the most powerful mafia family in Sicily. But none of them knew that the quietest person there, a shy waitress with trembling hands, was about to change everything. Sophia moved carefully among the guests, her eyes down, her tray steady despite her racing pulse. She had been warned a dozen times by her manager, "Don't stare. Don't speak first. Don't make mistakes." This was her second week serving in the Valerio estate's private banquets, and she still wasn't used to how heavy the silence could feel whenever one of the Valerio sons entered the room. She tried to focus on her task, refilling glasses, collecting plates, keeping her head low, but her hands kept shaking. The guests' eyes were sharp. Every move she made felt judged. Then the music softened, and a hush fell across the room. The double doors opened, and every man at the table stood. Sophia's breath hitched when she saw him. Dante Valerio, the Don's eldest son, tall, sharp-jawed, a quiet storm in a tailored black suit. His very presence shifted the air. But beside him walked the legend himself, Don Salvatore Valerio. He was older now, slower, his cane tapping the marble floor, yet the respect he commanded was absolute. His deep blue eyes carried the weight of wars, love, and loss. He had built an empire of silence, and everyone there lived within its rules. As the Don took his seat, Sophia approached his table, heart pounding so hard she could barely hear the music anymore. Her tray felt impossibly heavy. The Don glanced up briefly, acknowledging her only with a nod. "Grazie," he murmured as she poured his wine. His voice was rough but calm, aged like whiskey. And then it happened, something that not even she could explain. Maybe it was the sound of his voice. Maybe the way he said, "Grazie," the same way her grandmother once did. Without thinking, Sophia looked up and said softly, "Buonasera, Don Salvatore. Mi pari un uomo d'onore." "Good evening, Don Salvatore. You look like a man of honor." The entire room froze. The violin stopped mid-note. The guards straightened, every guest's eyes fixed on the young waitress. Her words weren't ordinary Italian. They were Sicilian dialect, the old kind, the kind only spoken by those born deep in the island's villages. Don Salvatore's glass halted halfway to his lips. His hands trembled. Slowly, he looked at her, not with anger, but disbelief. "Chi ti imparò questa lingua?" he asked in Sicilian, his voice breaking. "Who taught you that language?" Sophia's heart raced. "My grandmother," she said quietly. "She was from Palermo. She used to tell stories about a woman named Maria who spoke just like you." The wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed like thunder. His eyes filled with tears, tears no one had seen him shed in 20 years. "Maria," he whispered. "That was my wife's name." Gasps rippled through the guests. Dante turned sharply toward her, his expression unreadable. The Don stood, his cane forgotten, and stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Your grandmother's name—" "What was it?" Sophia hesitated. "Lucia Romano," she said softly. The Don's eyes widened. For a moment he didn't breathe. "Lucia Romano," he repeated, his lips shaking. "That was Maria's sister." The silence that followed was unbearable. The feared Don of Sicily, the man who made nations tremble, reached out and cupped the waitress's face with trembling hands. "After all these years," he murmured, his voice breaking completely, My wife's blood stands before me. And then, in front of hundreds of stunned guests, the Don pulled her into his arms, his tears falling freely for the first time in decades. Around them, no one dared move. The guards lowered their heads, and the violins began to play again, a slow, trembling melody that carried one unspoken truth through the room. The shy waitress had just awakened the heart of a man the world thought no longer had one. Sophia stood frozen in the Don's embrace, the warmth of his trembling hands still pressed against her cheeks. Around them, the grand hall remained eerily silent. No one dared breathe too loudly. The guests who had come expecting another display of power now watched as the most feared man in Sicily broke down before their eyes, whispering a dead woman's name like a prayer. Dante Valerio, standing a few steps away, stared at the scene with disbelief flickering behind his composed expression. He had seen his father rage, threaten, and command entire empires into obedience, but never cry. The Don finally released her, his hand resting on her shoulder as though afraid she might vanish. "Do you understand what you've done, child?" he asked softly. His voice was different now. Not the thunderous tone that silenced men, but the fragile one of a father who had just touched a ghost. Sophia shook her head slowly. I'm sorry if I did something wrong," she whispered, her hands twisting the edge of her apron. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile no one thought he was capable of. "Wrong?" he murmured. "No, my dear. You brought back the sound of my wife's voice. You spoke like her. You even smiled like her sister." His gaze softened further, and for the first time, he didn't look like a mafia don. He looked like an old man who had finally remembered what love felt like. Dante stepped closer, his deep voice cutting gently through the tension. "Father, maybe you should rest," he said carefully, his tone laced with both concern and confusion. But the Don waved him off. "Rest?" he scoffed, his accent thickening as emotion bled through. "I have rested long enough hiding from ghosts. Tonight, one returned to me, not to haunt, but to remind me that there is still family left in this world." Sophia's throat tightened. "My grandmother, she used to talk about Sicily," she said quietly, "about a big house near the sea and a sister she lost contact with after a fire. She never told us why." Don Salvatore's eyes glistened as he nodded slowly. "That house was ours. The fire, it was no accident. My enemies thought they could take everything from me, even her." His voice cracked slightly before he steadied it. "But your grandmother lived, and now her granddaughter serves me wine in my own home. You call that coincidence?" No one dared speak. The Don turned to the guests. Politicians, businessmen, rival bosses who had come only to flatter and watch, and raised his hand. "This girl," he declared, his voice strong now, "is blood of my blood, a Valerio by heart and by fate. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dante's eyes met Sophia's, sharp, assessing, but not unkind. He saw the innocence there, the unpolished truth his world had long forgotten. For the first time in years, something inside him stirred. Curiosity mixed with something dangerously close to admiration. The Don placed his arm around her shoulders as he turned toward his son. "Dante," he said firmly, "from this night forward she stays under our protection." "She belongs to this family." Sophia's breath caught. She didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified. This wasn't just kindness. It was a declaration that would change everything. Dante gave a slow nod, though his jaw tightened slightly. "As you wish, father." The Don smiled faintly and looked back at her. "You see, my dear, you didn't just speak my language tonight. You spoke to my soul." And as the violins resumed their soft melody, the world around them began to move again. Guests whispering, cameras flashing, guards exchanging looks. But for Sophia, everything felt distant. All she could feel was the weight of the Don's words, and the quiet, unreadable gaze of Dante Valerio following her every move. In a single evening, She had gone from a nameless waitress to the girl who made the most powerful family in Sicily remember their humanity. But in the shadows, where loyalty and blood ran hand in hand, even miracles came with a price, one that Sophia was about to discover soon.